Yeah, I don't think you do the same thing again either, but this is Jerry Jones we're talking about, right? And he's gonna as you know better than anyone, like he's gonna kind of do what he wants to do. And if he sees that parallel, like the way we're talking about it now, maybe he sees Ashton as kind of the 2025 version of what was that 9 years ago.
Welcome to the NFL on Fox podcast. I'm your host, Dave Helman, and lying season rolls on. It's the smokescreen time of year. Pro days are in full swing. Prospects are working out. Tidbits are getting leaked about who's thinking what and who might go where. It's the subterfuge part of the off-season calendar. We're going to dive into all of that on today's show. Our good friend Ben Arthur of foxsports.com joins me in a little bit to talk about that pro day circuit. A couple of big ones this week. Cam Ward worked out at Miami, as you might have heard. Also had really fun Ashton Jeanty conversation. Ben with a story about Jeanty hitting foxsports.com on Thursday. Make sure you check that out. Really good conversation coming up there. Before we do that, couple noteworthy news items hitting the wire since the last time we had a show. Let's start at the top. Actually, it just became official as we were recording this. Russell Wilson has signed his 1-year deal with the New York Giants. Word came down, ironically, I think less than 24 hours after we talked to our guy Jordan Schultz about the possibility Russell Wilson did in fact sign with New York. It is a 1-year deal with 10.5 million guaranteed. There's a whole bunch of incentives and milestones that can make it as valuable as $21 million, but the guarantee is roughly $10.5 million. Low end QB1 money. I think Sam Darnold got 10 million guaranteed last year when he agreed to quarterback the Vikings. So to give you an idea of where things stand with Russell Wilson. Having said that, still looking likely to be the starter in New York. And that's just when you follow the money. Again, Russ's guarantees for 1 year are more than the value of Jameis Winston's entire 2-year contract. So it's easy to guess that he would be the starter. But Russ actually said on Wednesday when he signed the contract, he does expect to be the starter for the New York Giants. Obviously, that just further raises the level of intrigue just like that overnight. Basically, I guess in the span of 3 or 4 days, the Giants went from having only Tommy DeVito in their quarterback room to now having two of the most veteran quarterbacks you can get in the NFL. Russell Wilson, drafted in 2012, won a Super Bowl at the Giants' home stadium, MetLife Stadium, all the way back in 2013 with the Seattle Seahawks. Obviously, been all over from Seattle to Denver, Pittsburgh, and now New York. And of course, Jameis Winston, a number 1 overall pick back in 2015, a guy that has been around the NFL for a decade at this point. It's hard to get more veteran than that. Will it lead to results? Will it help Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen keep their jobs? Will it stop the New York Giants from drafting a quarterback or trading up to draft a quarterback? All those options seemingly still on the table when you consider that these are short-term deals for older quarterbacks. It's all technically on the table for the Giants. Should it be? It's a different conversation. I talked about it with Jordan Schultz on Tuesday's episode, if you want to go check that out. I also actually wrote for foxsports.com. I personally think with Russ and with Jameis Winston in the fold, I think the Giants would be better served punting on the quarterback situation for the year. Obviously, you still need a quarterback of the future. Is it going to come this year? I say no. I think with a guy in Russell Wilson who, for all of his flaws, for however far he's fallen from his peak back in 2019, 2020, a guy that can clearly still take you to the playoffs because he did it with the Pittsburgh Steelers last year, I would advocate you go after the best possible playmaker that's not a quarterback. Either Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter, maybe both of them will be there for the Giants at number 3 overall. I would take that guy and worry about quarterback next year. That's just me. If you want to go read my full reasoning, it's up on foxsports.com. You can find it on the Fox Sports app. I would appreciate the click modestly. It's not clickbait. It's a well-reasoned, well-articulated story. Just, if you're a Giants fan, if you want to call me an idiot, go give it a read and come find me and we can talk about it. The other big news item, other than the quarterback signing in New York, would be that Stefon Diggs, officially a New England Patriot. He agreed to a 3-year contract with the Pats. It's worth up to $69 million to join the Patriots. As we all know by now, up to is agent speak. That's just PR, if you will. The real number is the guarantees. And I don't believe the full structure of Diggs's contract has been made public as of yet, but he got roughly 26 million guaranteed dollars, which is a nice payday for a 31-year-old receiver coming off of a torn ACL. Diggs tore the ACL in week 8 of last season when he was with the Houston Texans. So to get just shy of $30 million guaranteed at that age, coming off of a major injury, not bad for Stefon Diggs. I'm going to guess the Patriots can get out of this deal in a year or two if they want to. But I will say, even at his age, all of that good stuff taken into account, Diggs was on pace for roughly 100 catches and 1,000 yards when he got hurt. At the midway point of the season, he had 47 catches and just shy of 500 yards for Houston. So provided the rehab and the recovery is going well, I think Stefon Diggs still probably has some gas in the tank, especially when you're talking about New England. I mean, they had to do something about their receiver room. I don't think you can go into the draft with what they had available. So we'll see what the recovery timeline is for Diggs. He posted a really cool video of himself squatting a lot of weight, as guys like to do at this time of year. Injury happened halfway through the season, so it's conceivable he could be ready to participate for some portion of training camp. Maybe it runs into the season. You're just going to have to wait and see. But for the money, I think this is a solid addition for Drake May for a team that just needed somebody at wide receiver. And I think really my big takeaway here is looking for veteran receivers is an expensive proposition. You look at the deals that have gotten done just now. Stefon Diggs, $69 million total, 26 of it guaranteed. Cooper Kupp, 3 years, $45 million total, almost $18 million of that guaranteed. Devontae Adams in LA, 2 years, $44 million, $26 million of that guaranteed. These are all for receivers well over the age of 30. In Diggs's case, coming off of a major injury, if you want a veteran receiver who has put up numbers, you are going to have to pay dearly for that production. And I think that's why so many wide receivers get drafted year after year. There's just so many good players coming out of college, so many receivers that are able to hit the ground running right away. We see it every single year, from Puka Nacua to Lad McConkey. Obviously, the first round receivers, you would hope that those guys are going to hit. This really feels like the business model, because if you're trying to shop for a veteran proven receiver on the free agency market, you are going to pay a lot of money, even for an older, a potentially injured receiver. So that's a long way of saying I think this trend of drafting receivers year after year, it's not going anywhere. But big ups to Stefon Diggs. That's a fantastic contract. I'm curious to see how quickly he can get himself back on the field. If he's fully healthy, I think that could go a long way for Drake May once the Patriots are done adding assets in the draft. All right. That's it for current events. As I said, had a great conversation with Ben Arthur lined up. Check it out. All right, Ben. Well, last time I talked to you was the NFL Combine, which is one milestone on the path to the draft. And now we're at the next one, which is we're in the middle of the best and silliest part of pro day season, one after the other, every single day. I woke up this morning to the news that LSU tackle Will Campbell's arm was a quarter of an inch longer at LSU pro day than it was at the NFL combine. Just to give you an idea of the amount of focus we put on these workouts, we've got guys actually growing their wingspan in 6 weeks time. I've been covering the draft for a while. I think that's a new one for me.
Yeah, it's a ridiculous time of the year. It's a time of the year I get quite sick of. And especially I think just in regards to like these skill guys and the quarterbacks like at their pro days. I think more so like the quarterbacks when people are talking about, oh, this guy amazed like at his pro day, and it's like it's a script. It's routes on air. Like it's there's no defense, there's no pressure, there are no DBs. Like why are we acting so surprised about these things, or why is this guy's stock going up or down because of really a non-football type of situation? So it's quite funny to me, but I guess it's part of the machine. So
Wait, so that's what we want to lead with here is Cam Ward, the prohibitive favorite to go number one in the draft, Miami Heisman Trophy contender. You're trying to tell me that it didn't do anything for you to see him throw the ball 84 yards in the air, even though his college tape is like littered with plays like that? It didn't do anything for you?
With that particular Cam Ward throw, I don't think it was 84 yards because the Miami's practice field was actually shorter. Like it's kind of shorter than the actual. So I think the yardage markers kind of give a different like
Wow, so you're saying it was fake news to begin with. It wasn't even an 84-yard throw.
Hey, I'm just, it was a great throw, and it is a great workout and whatnot, but I don't think it was quite 84 yards as it's believed to be. And I know some people have talked about that too. But regardless, regardless, I mean, it was, yeah, I'm sure the workout went fine. I mean, everything I've seen and heard, like it went well, and I know a lot of people have gotten a kick out of him, like on that one play where he kind of booted to his left, threw like a dart, and then said to Titans president of football ops Chad Brinker and GM Mike Borgonzi, I'm solidifying it today. So I know people had a lot of fun with that, but yeah, I'm not sure. Like with particularly with the Titans and Cam Ward, I'm not sure we got anything new. I mean, I'm sure it was a great workout, but yeah, in terms of this officially solidifying it, I'm not sure I kind of agree with those kind of proclamations.
Ooh, let's dive into that because I'll be up front. Like that's what I wanted to talk about leading into this segment is Cam Ward worked out. And yes, I was being very tongue in cheek. I don't care at all what he did in the actual workout, even a little bit. But you mentioned that comment he made to Titans brass. And then after the workout, you see video of Cam Ward hugging it out with the Titans coaching staff. He dapped up Brian Callahan. He gave a hug to the Titans OC and their quarterbacks coach. And Ben, Brian Callahan was cheesing talking to this guy. Like he was so excited, so happy to be there with him and to be talking to him. And I am buying the hype that, look, I mean, you're right that obviously nothing is official until the phone call is made on draft night, but I think Cam Ward is going to be a Titan. I think they are enamored with this guy, and I don't think they're going to be willing to trade the pick. Like maybe Cam Ward is not as good of a prospect as some of the guys we've seen come through in recent years. He's a good enough prospect that I think you ride with him and turn in the card. And like I said, I don't think this workout is the reason why, but I just think over the last 6 weeks, I really buy the idea that the Titans are sold on Cam Ward.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt that the Titans are enamored with Cam Ward at this point. They've certainly all the indications are there. like you said, and those reactions at his pro day seem to be very genuine. But just, Dave, honestly, something I've thought about as this process has gone along and how it has seemed more and more inevitable almost that Cam Ward is going to be the guy for the Titans. It makes me think, like, what if this is all just kind of just more leverage for the Titans? Like, why are we so sure that this is going to happen? And look, I don't doubt that they love him, but I'm not also not sure that we can say for a fact that they still wouldn't be comfortable moving off of that pick if they get the right package. And certainly it would seem that the haul that they get in return would probably have to be bigger at this point. But just the more that we've gotten this image that it's inevitable, it the other part of me, the business side of me, is thinking, what if this is just kind of a play on their part to see if they can get a nice haul? And look, I think Cam Ward would be a perfect guy for them to take, but I also think that we can't maybe totally rule out a trade down to get more picks. Uh, we've talked a lot about kind of how the Titans have these talent needs, right? And at multiple premium positions. Edge rusher, they probably need two edge rushers. They need a wide receiver. They need a cornerback. And obviously they need a quarterback. That's number one, first and foremost. But I don't think we should be kind of handing in the pick to the commish at this point. I think there's still a long way to go, and we've kind of gotten indications that Mike Borgonzi is still going to field those calls at this point. And I think the more and more that it seems like Cam Ward is their guy, the more and more leverage that the Titans actually have. So I think that's something we should be considering as well.
I appreciate this line of thought because, like I said, I'm buying that it feels like a foregone conclusion. It is an interesting point to think that if you can sell yourself as really loving Cam Ward, maybe you make it that much more expensive. It is interesting to think too, if the Titans were willing to trade this pick, obviously anything's possible, but like the logical trade partners are Cleveland at number 2, the New York Giants at number 3. Maybe you even throw in the Las Vegas Raiders at number 6 if they view Geno Smith as more of a short-term option. These aren't like huge jumps up the board, or it wouldn't be a huge trade down for Tennessee. It's interesting to think, how big of a package could you get if you're only going to drop back a couple of spots, let's say with a New York Giants who might want to move up to number 1.
Yeah, it is a fascinating question because, like, and we've talked about it, right? Like, just the top of this quarterback class, and I guess Cam Ward in particular, isn't viewed, like, perception wise at least, to be what the caliber of guys we've seen in previous years. And could that sway a team, just even just a couple spots back, like the Giants, for instance? Would that sway their desire to kind of give the world to the Titans, right? Like, would they even think that's worth it just because he may not be viewed as like um, a Caleb Williams type of prospect, or a Joe Burrow, or a Trevor Lawrence, whatever? So I think that's something to consider. And yeah, what the Titans are looking, it's going to be fascinating. I don't really have an answer to that because it is, um
Well, I don't think you can have
yeah,
the
they're
answer, but
yeah.
at this, I am just curious. Like, I'm thinking about a few years ago, the trade with the between the Bears and the Carolina Panthers. It netted all of this stuff for the Chicago Bears in the long run. That's how they wound up getting Caleb Williams. So in
Mm.
the long run, it makes a ton of sense. And if you are willing to take that risk that Cam Ward isn't the next rookie sensation like we've seen the last couple years, if you're comfortable with that and you want to ride that, hey, next year we'll have multiple first round picks to play around with, it makes sense. But if you really feel strongly about Cam Ward, I think the safer, smarter thing is to just ride with that. And like I said, even maybe you don't think Cam Ward is as good as a Caleb Williams or a Jaden Daniels, or even, I know Trevor Lawrence hasn't lived up to the hype when he was drafted, but as a prospect, even if Cam Ward isn't on that level, if he passes the threshold where you think he can be a franchise quarterback, I would say don't outthink yourself, which is why I think he's ultimately going to be the pick for the Titans.
And I think the thing to consider too, like we when we talk about potential trade candidates for this pick, like everyone only talks about the same few teams. We talk about the Browns, we talk about like the Giants. What if a team like the Saints wants to get in the mix? What if teams in the middle of the first round who maybe don't need a quarterback, who seem to not really need a quarterback in 2025, but think Cam Ward is their guy long term? What's to stop one of those teams from giving just this massive package? I mean, I think every year to some sort we see some kind of surprise. And look, I think we shouldn't completely rule it out just because a national insider or pundit, like, people aren't really talking about that. I think we have to be wary for that as well. I think those who are kind of silent can have a lot of power as well. So I think we should.
I mean, hey, there's precedent for it, right? I
Yeah,
mean, it was
absolutely.
the LA Rams traded up from the middle of the pack to get Jared Goff, number 1 overall,
From
all
the
the way
Titans.
back in 2016. Yeah, from the
Oh,
Tennessee Titans, in fact. It's doable. I just, at some point, I think the cost becomes really prohibitive. I would be surprised. I'd be kind of surprised if there's a trade at all. B, if it goes beyond the first 6 or 7 picks, I would definitely be surprised. But I also have said before, no disrespect to a ton of good players. I'm sure there's going to be some great players that come out of this draft. I think this draft is lacking a little bit in intrigue compared to previous years. So if somebody wants to jump up the board, I'm okay with that, because it would create drama out of a draft that doesn't really feel like it has a lot of it right now.
yeah, I would love that, right? And I think so much of the draft is a crapshoot, anyways. If you have a guy that you're confident in, uh, your scouting process, like, he checks all the boxes for you, you think he's a blue chip guy. I mean, take that swing, right? Like, I would love to see that. So I wouldn't doubt that from. I would, yeah, I would actually be surprised if something of that sort doesn't happen, just because there only really seems to be one quarterback that people are viewing as like a blue chip guy at one point. So if there are one of those other generational type prospects at other positions that a team wants to be aggressive for, I wouldn't be totally shocked if we see that happen this year. So
And we talked about Shador last time you came on the show, but the way that he fits into this is equally fascinating, because you could easily convince me he goes number 2 overall right
mhm.
behind Cam Ward. You could easily convince me he experiences a little bit of a draft night fall, just based on the conflicting opinions that we see from around the media and around the league. So what teams ultimately think of him and which teams have him graded which way, it does promise to create a little bit of drama, even if it doesn't feel like there's a lot right now. Speaking of pro days, like I said, there's 3 going on every day at this time of the year. And Wednesday, we got to look at one of the most high profile prospects in this draft class. That would be Ashton Jeanty, who you actually have a piece running on Thursday. So if you're listening to this, it's Thursday. Go check it out on foxsports.com and the Fox Sports app. You had a chance to talk to Ashton Jeanty. You mentioned he's a much more versatile running back than he gets credit for. So I thought it was very fitting that at his pro day on Wednesday, he went through a pass catcher drill at Boise State, almost as if to say, like, hey, guys, I'm more than just a guy that takes the rock behind the line. I can do a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and he could certainly take the ball from the backfield and carry the ball like to the best of them, right? I mean, over 2,600 yards, I think the second most in FBS history. But yeah, he can be quite the catcher out of the backfield as well. And 20, a lot of people forget actually, and I guess coming out of 2023, he wasn't as big of a name as he is now, but he actually led all FBS running backs in receiving yards. So it's not like he can't catch at a high level. It's just that he was just so dominant on the ground, and that's the way Boise State designed their offense. But he can certainly catch the ball at a high level, and you look at what some of the best running backs in the league can do. I mean, Christian McCaffrey, Jameer Gibbs. I mean, I think he certainly views himself in that light.
Curious. I'll never forget it. Like on the opening night of college football season, it's easy to watch football late on the West Coast. It's one of the best things about being here is like even the late games start at like 7, 8 o'clock at night. I'll never forget Ashton Jeanty jumping onto my radar in the season opener against Georgia Southern. He went for 267 and 6 touchdowns on the first night of his season. And I feel like I've been saying his name constantly ever since. But I'll be honest with you, and I'll take some fault for this, but I don't know a ton about him as a guy. I'm curious, having a chance to spend a few minutes with him. What was your biggest takeaway from that aspect? I think anybody listening to this show knows what he can do as a running back. But what was your impression of him just as an interview, as a person?
Yeah, I think there are multiple components to that day, Dave. I mean, number one, he's really big on his Haitian culture, where his family comes from, and the toughness and resilience of the Haitian people, and how he kind of feels like that's part of who he is. I think a growing number of people are learning that he spent a part of his childhood overseas in Italy. He was actually, quite the star in kind of military base schools in Europe, as you can imagine, before taking kind of the prep scene in the US by storm. But I would say the biggest thing, Dave, from our conversation was just how committed he is to being like a franchise type of player for whatever organization drafts him. Like there are multiple times I asked him about kind of his game, right, and what he feels like he brings to the table and what his skill set is. But more times than not, he kept going to the kind of person he is, and the kind of standard he wants to set, the kind of person he wants to be to his teammates, and just being that guy that people can look up to for whatever they need. And we have to remember, like, or I don't think a lot of people really understand this, but like he could have left Boise State, right? Like after his 2023 season, and he got more money, like in terms of offers from just other bigger schools, and he wanted to stay at Boise State, and that kind of goes to what he was telling me just about relationships being such a big deal for him, and him just kind of connecting the dots in terms of the better relationships you have for these guys, the more they're gonna want to block for you up front, the more he vibes with guys, and the byproduct of that is kind of team success. So whenever I wanted to ask kind of about what his game is about, he kind of kept going to what he feels, the kind of person he feels that he is as a leader, and just those character traits. That's what he really wanted to emphasize in our conversation.
I'm just going to step out on a limb and say it. I don't think it's that big of a gamble. He's going to become the first running back drafted in the first round from outside of the power conferences since 2018. It was Rashad Penny from San Diego State back in 2018 was a first round pick of the Seahawks. And it would be just the fourth time in the last 20 years that a running back from outside the power conferences went in the first round. I know Boise State is a football power. They've been on everybody's radar for 20 years or so at this point. It's definitely a big program, but it's still a sizable jump from Boise State on, western side of the country. You're playing a lot of your games after half the country goes to bed. You're not generating a lot of buzz until late in the season when you're a Heisman candidate. And not only are you going to be a first round pick, but I think you're so right. This will be like a franchise cornerstone type of pick in the sense that this will be the type of first round pick where the jerseys are on the racks in the stores, like the night you get the phone call. Everybody in the fan base is going to be looking forward to this. So it's interesting to hear that, knowing the type of scrutiny, the type of expectations that are going to be on this guy from the very jump.
Yeah, certainly the level of competition is going to be a jump for him, right? Uh, and but he did have some good games against great teams. I mean, he rushed for I don't remember exact numbers against Oregon, but that was one of the games he had over 160 or 170 on the ground.
He had
Oh,
192 and
190.
3 touchdowns.
Yeah.
Again, second week of the season. So he follows up 267 and 6 with 192 and 3 against a college football playoff team. Yeah, no. Hey, he's done it against as good a
Everyone.
competition as you could ask. I definitely would never try to take that away from him.
Yeah. So yeah, he's done it against Oregon. I mean, even in the Penn State game, the CFP game, I know it wasn't maybe as efficient as we've just grown accustomed to him, but he did go over 100 yards in that game, and we know the caliber of opponent they are as well. So yeah, he's going to be a fun guy to track in terms of his career. I think like with any running back, you want to see kind of what the offensive line situation is going to be for said player. But yeah, he can go. I mean, I've seen as high as 6 to the Raiders. I think the Bears at number 10. Looking at what they've done with their offensive line, I really like the fit of potentially like the Broncos. I think the Broncos. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think they have like the 19th pick
They're
or something.
20th. 20th,
20th.
yeah.
Yeah, I really like that fit. I mean, he would instantly be RB1, of course, and they have a great line. We know what Bo Nix did as a rookie, and they have a really great defense that can hold it down. And I think that would be a really great situation for him in an ascending team and a great offensive minded head coach and Sean Payton. So, but yeah, Ashton Jeanty is going to be a fun guy to track at the next level.
I'm so glad you said the Broncos, because just like you said with Cam Ward and with potentially trading for a quarterback, we fall into this pattern, and it's an understandable pattern, right? The Raiders, it makes a ton of sense. They need skill players. Pete Carroll loves himself a running back. I looked this up. In addition to trading for Marshawn Lynch, the Seahawks drafted 5 running backs with a top 100 pick while Pete Carroll was there. So that makes a ton of sense. Chicago makes a ton of sense. Dallas makes a ton of sense. We can talk about them in a minute, but I am intrigued by the idea that, again, these teams value guys in their own way, and I'm constantly looking for the spot where a team might surprise us. Like maybe it doesn't make sense on paper that the Carolina Panthers or the New York Jets would want Ashton Jeanty, or oh my goodness, the San Francisco 49ers. Can you imagine if they drafted Ashton Jeanty? But at the same time, if a team has him graded the right way year after year, they show us that they will do this stuff.
Yeah. Absolutely. And we have to remember, too, a couple years ago when the Lions took Jahmyr Gibbs, I mean, people were so up in arms about, like, why would you take a running back that high? But we've seen time and time again, if a guy is a special playmaker, regardless of his position, like, they can more than make up for that value and impact winning at a really, really high level. And Ashton Jeanty certainly can be that type of player in the right situation. And we talked about his pass catching ability and how that was really untapped for him this past season. And so he goes into a right situation where they have a great O line and they want him to catch the ball and they move him around, maybe put him in the slot too. Like, you have a really fun chess piece to work with if you're an offensive coordinator.
What do you think his floor is? Like, what's the lowest you could see him going? Because I like everything you said about the Broncos, and Sean Payton has been open about the fact that he's looking for offensive playmakers. I have a hard time believing he just falls to Denver. I could imagine Sean Payton trading up to get him. That seems like something Sean Payton would do. But for me, it's just hard to imagine a guy this talented falling beyond, I don't know, honestly, maybe Dallas. Like if he really falls all the way to 12, it's hard for me to imagine him getting past that point. What do you think?
Yeah, I would. I think I'd probably have to tend to agree with you, especially coming out of the year that we just saw with running backs, and if you have a really special guy, what they can do for your team, and like my previous point, their impact on winning. And Ashton Jeanty on paper and his resume says that he can totally be that guy too. So it would be really hard for me to imagine him getting out of the teens. By no means do I see him going beyond probably the early 20s. But I think the teens would probably, if you put like a gun to my head, I'd probably say the teens. But I could see a theoretical situation where maybe, okay, maybe low 20s.
Yeah, I mean, and that goes back to the whole conversation about positional value. I mean, at the end of the day, even having just watched what Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry did, you could still argue. I mean, Derrick Henry signed in Baltimore on a very cheap contract, and Saquon Barkley, we don't have to relitigate it all right here, but he was allowed to leave by the team that drafted him. So,
Yeah.
even as valuable as running backs can be, will that be reflected in the decisions that teams make with something as important as a first round pick?
Yeah. Yeah, ultimately that's the big question, Dave. I mean, it really depends on the team, like the franchise and how that particular coach values the run game and how they envision that player and what their role is, right? Like if someone wants Genty to maybe be more of a traditional back and maybe not catch the ball as much, I mean, then yeah, there's probably a situation where um that yeah, he's probably maybe a little bit later of a first round pick. But if a team has a very particular vision for him, like Jameer Gibbs or the Falcons and Bijan Robinson, something like that, uh, then yeah, I think you kind of take that gamble because going back to one of my previous points too, the draft is kind of a crapshoot in general, right? And if you believe a guy is transcendent, even if he plays running back, then you invest uh, kind of that premium of a pick in said player.
I really do love the parallels with Dallas too. I was prepping for this segment and I was aware of this, but it hadn't hit me recently, and I was laughing to myself thinking about 2016. The Cowboys found themselves with a unusually high draft pick. They had the fourth pick in that draft because their good but aging quarterback got hurt the year before, and they weren't very good. And they turned around and they drafted Ezekiel Elliott. And the whole point was to make life easier on their defense, to extend Tony Romo's career. And here we are, however many years later, and the Cowboys have an unusually high pick because Dak Prescott got hurt and they have a need at running back. And I'm going to laugh if they do the exact same thing. And it's really not a knock on Ashton Jeanty, but it will be funny if they have the same answer to the same problem. Meanwhile, I would point out that Zeke Elliott's play dropped off after 6 seasons, and Jalen Ramsey played at a much higher level for a much longer period of time. I wonder if the Cowboys would see it that way or if they would do the exact same thing. Because any Cowboy fans listening, it could have been Jalen Ramsey and Derrick Henry just as easily as what they did. And sitting here in 2025, I don't think you do the same thing all over again, even as great as Zeke was for the first 4 or 5 years of his career.
Yeah, I don't think you do the same thing again either, but this is Jerry Jones we're talking about, right? And he's gonna as you know better than anyone, like he's gonna kind of do what he wants to do. And if he sees that parallel, like the way we're talking about it now, maybe he sees Ashton as kind of the 2025 version of what was that 9 years ago and
I know I didn't want to say 9 years ago because it depressed me. I can't believe
yeah, it's crazy. It's
I
crazy.
can't believe the Zeke and Jared Goff and Carson Wentz draft was 9 years ago. That's not fun.
Yeah, that's insane in itself. But yeah, beyond like there's the parallels, there's the and he played high school ball in Frisco, right in the stars kind of the backyard, right? Like
Yes.
you look at
Oh,
all those points, like you could really see like why Jerry Jones would do this again. Even if you're a Cowboys fan and you don't want him to do it again, you could see why he might. Uh, but but yeah, it'll be interesting because I mean the Cowboys, I mean they need a lot, right? And their offensive line situation is, I mean, they still have some guys up front, but they were what third worst in rushing uh last season. I think in total rushing, and then in yards per carry they were like tied for fifth worst or something. So they're at the bottom of the barrel there, and so yeah, I mean, when you take a great running back, you have to have a great plan for said running back too.
that is such a great point, Ben, and it's worth saying clearly. I mean, when the Cowboys drafted Zeke, they had Tyron Smith, Travis Frederick, and Zach Martin in their prime
Yeah,
playing offensive line. It's just not the same situation. They also are thin at receiver. Like you said, they got a lot of stuff. And I like Ashton Jeanty a lot. I think he would be successful if he were drafted by the Cowboys, but I'm not convinced that it's the right decision at this exact time for the big picture.
neither am I. And look, maybe Jerry Jones won't even have that temptation because Genty might be off the board before then. So maybe this is all moot point, and like a team like the Bears, which I could totally see them picking him too, like just what Ben Johnson has done to really invest in the help around Caleb Williams. We saw what they did in free agency with the offensive line, signing the center Drew Dalman, and then trading for the guards Thuney and what Jonah Jackson
Jonah
from,
Jackson, yeah.
yeah, from the Chiefs and the Rams respectively. And maybe the next part is kind of investing at running back. So I could see him going to the Bears at 10 if Pete Carroll doesn't take another running back high again. So
Uh, and to go back to our point, what's really going to make me laugh is on draft night when he's a Jacksonville Jaguar, just like everybody predicted.
yep,
All right.
that
Before I get you out of here, I did want to hit on another piece you wrote for us, which I enjoyed, which was your top candidates to break out post free agency. As tends to happen, I think it's worthwhile to focus in on the quarterbacks. You had a few that were interesting. Caleb Williams, I think, makes a ton of sense. We don't need to spend a lot of time on that. The Bears have once again built up their offense. They hired a play caller to be their head coach. I don't think anybody should be surprised if he breaks out in his second season. The two that I want to talk to you about, let's start with the other second year guy, the one that we really haven't seen, because you just said it with your whole chest that you think JJ McCarthy is going to break out with the Minnesota Vikings in year two.
yeah, I think yeah, I did say that. I think it was really just in that we haven't seen him, right. And then when he does play this year, assuming, right, that he's still going to be QB1, there's a very good chance that he pops because of just what they've done around him. We already knew the weapons they had, right? TJ Hawkinson, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and now they add Jordan Mason, who they acquired via trade. I mean, that's as good of a number two running back as you can get. They invested in the offensive line, signing two former Colts and Ryan Kelly and what was probably the top guard on the free agent market in Will Fries. I mean, I think the way, and then we know what Kevin O'Connell can do with quarterbacks. So I think with the way it's set up, we're gonna either he's gonna pop because he's a guy, or we're gonna, the flip side of that is we're gonna find out, I think maybe relatively quickly, if he has it or not, just because there's nothing more that you can almost ask for if you're a quarterback entering a situation.
JJ makes me talk out of both sides of my mouth because I agree with everything that you just said. And like I have so much trust and respect for Kevin O'Connell. I completely believe JJ McCarthy could be a really good quarterback in that offense. At the exact same time, it's weird to me that they haven't invested in another quarterback at all, just because He's coming off of an injury. You've only seen him play one half of preseason football. And you at least have to allow for the possibility that either he's not completely ready from a health standpoint or he's not completely ready because he's a young guy that hasn't played a lot of football. It's strange to me that they haven't gone after some kind of veteran backup. While at the same time, I think it's the right decision because I like JJ McCarthy. Like, I'm still struggling to decide how I feel about that.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. It totally makes sense that JJ is their guy, but it does seem like a tremendous gamble. Like just in how they've kind of proceeded, right? Like it seemed like when they didn't get, I mean, obviously they let Sam Darnold go, but then it seemed like when they didn't get Daniel Jones, they just kind of didn't really care about the veteran
Yeah, they were
quarterback.
like, all right, there
Yeah.
goes that dream. We're just not going to
Yeah,
mess
it's
with it.
like, all right, Daniel Jones, all right, and then the Aaron Rodgers thing, we still don't know completely what's going to happen with that, but it just seems like they've completely neglected or maybe over leveraged themselves just with kind of how they've proceeded there. So it's kind of been a head scratcher to me how they've proceeded there. Um, yeah, like this could all be moot point if JJ is great, but what if he's not, and or he gets hurt, or he's just not quite ready, like you said? Then it's like, then why didn't you invest in Jameis Winston? Why didn't you invest in Russell Wilson? Why weren't you maybe more aggressive to bring back Daniel Jones or just all these other veteran, very logical, viable veteran quarterback options that were there, and they just kind of let them pass by. So I don't know what they're doing. It might, again, make it might be moot point at the end of the day, but it just with where we're at right now, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
It just makes me think the Vikings have another card to play. And general manager Kwesi Adofo-Mensah said on Wednesday that there's nothing in the works with Aaron Rodgers right now, although he didn't close the door entirely. It makes me think either the Vikings have an idea that they might draft another guy, not like a first round pick, but maybe just somebody they can have behind JJ, or the spicier take is that there are other options to obtain quarterbacks. Like, I don't know, maybe Kirk Cousins becomes cheaper after the draft, and Kevin O'Connell already knows how to work with him. So I just feel like the Vikings have something more up their sleeves, even if they really do believe in JJ McCarthy.
And we have to toss out Will Levis out there too, right? Cam
Ooh, yeah,
Ward,
I like that.
yeah, if Cam Ward is indeed the guy, I mean, clearly Levis wouldn't be in the picture at that point, and he still has a lot of value. Has only played two seasons, and yeah, he had the turnover issues, but like in the right system with the right culture around him, the right supporting cast, and a great patient offensive guru and a head coach like Kevin O'Connell, he's a guy you can invest in if you're that organization. So I wouldn't rule that out either.
That's how much I believe in Kevin O'Connell. You say the name of any quarterback with starting experience, it doesn't matter how poorly it's gone for the guy. If you tell me he's going to Minnesota, I'm like, yes, I would watch Will Levis with Kevin O'Connell. That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, once the draft is over, we'll ship you a day 3 pick for the last 2 years on Will Levis's deal. Like, what's wrong with that? That sounds great.
You
One other guy that really jumped out to me, and I'm gonna need to see the vision. I need you to sell me on Justin Fields as a breakout candidate because it's a lot less about Justin Fields for me. It's the combination of Justin Fields with a so-so cast of players around him on the Jets offense. I don't know. I don't think I see it.
Yeah, and I get your skepticism, but I mean, I'd say Fields was definitely more of my wild cards on that breakout candidates list. But I think familiarity helps a lot, and he has Garrett Wilson there from Ohio State, their top tight end on the roster. Jeremy Ruckert was with him at Ohio State. Their one of their centers, Josh Myers, another guy who was with him at Ohio State. There are a lot of familiar faces. Their new offensive coordinator comes from Detroit. I think they're going to be able to build an offense around him. And I think in Justin's case, getting out of Chicago and being with a kind of a more stable organization. And I know he didn't start as many games as he probably wanted to when there was the whole Russell Wilson factor there. But I think that experience was really beneficial for him. And a lot of times with guys, I mean, sometimes, and we've seen this with guys who've popped later in their career, maybe it's that first stop that doesn't work out, but then your second stop, you're in a position where you're able to learn a bit more, and then you seize that opportunity to be a starter again. And I think with Fields' case, that's kind of how this situation is looking like it may play out. And then, like I said, the familiarity component of that with some guys that he knows from his college days when he was at his best, I think there could be the perfect storm for him, so to speak, to where he uh, plays decent. So I think we have to consider that.
I mean, to be fair to him, he was not bad when he started for the Steelers. I think they lost to the Colts and he could have had a better day, but like for the 5 or 6 weeks that he was in the starting lineup in Pittsburgh, he was good enough that people were confused and questioned Mike Tomlin for making the switch. And obviously they proceeded to then go on a big win streak and everybody forgot about it. So I think I buy that he can be serviceable, but like I said, I'm not convinced I buy that the Jets' offensive talent is enough to lift him up. I mean, I really like Garrett Wilson. They've got really good running backs in New York, but the totality of it, and to be fair to them, they have a top 10 draft pick coming up next month as well. So maybe that changes, but all of it in totality, it just kind of feels all right to me.
It does, but I think we find ourselves at this sort of point every offseason, right? Where there are guys where we look in a year out and it's like, wow, that guy popped. Like a Sam Darnold. No one knew that he was going to pop. Geno Smith, what he was able to do in Seattle after Russell Wilson was gone. I mean, no one expected that. The way Baker Mayfield kind of turned around his career, no one expected that. I'm not saying Justin Fields is any of those guys, but I think there's a chance that he could be, and especially with the those guys I've listed that have happened recently, and you get a quarterback who you haven't given up on, and you put him in the right situation and you give him the chance to grow, and he's learned from previous failures and embarrassments and humiliation, and he turns that into something positive. I think Justin Fields has a good chance to be that next guy.
You know what I love about segments like this is however it goes, when Justin Fields makes a great play next season, every single time I'm going to think about this conversation. It's going to be lodged in my brain of like, well, yeah, Ben called it. Or, maybe if
Or I
he
didn't.
maybe I was gonna say, maybe if it doesn't go so well, I'll think back on it for other reasons. But either way, I just love putting this type of stuff on people's radars. We'll see how it ages. Ben, this was a lot of fun, man. We will be sure to check back in. Mercifully, we are entering April, and the draft will finally be upon us, and we won't have to speculate so much. But we'll be sure to catch up with you soon, man. I appreciate it.
Sounds good, Dave. Thank you.
All right, that does it for the show. Thanks again to Ben Arthur for stopping by, and thank you so much to y'all for listening. If you're not, please make sure you're subscribed. Go find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. You can find us on YouTube if you prefer. Wherever you get your pods, however you get your content, you can find us there, and we will be back on the other side of the weekend. All new episode coming on Tuesday. We got you covered as we inch closer to this 2025 NFL Draft. As always, I appreciate it so much, guys, and I will talk to you.